Back in 1999, before iPhones and GPS, I was taking a drive from Sacramento, California to Carson City, Nevada. The drive was only about 3 hours, and I was driving by myself to visit my girlfriend who had recently moved there for work. This was my first time taking the drive up there. All I had was a piece of paper with handwritten directions on it. It was around 8 p.m. when I left. Normally, I don't like driving at night, but I had to work till 6, and then I went home and showered first before I left. Now I'm on my way to Nevada. The drive is going smooth so far. Turn by turn, I scratch off the next direction written on my paper. It's about 10:15 now, and the only thing keeping me motivated to keep driving is the thought of being with my girlfriend. My mind starts wandering off somewhere as I'm thinking of her, and then I realize that I missed a turn. I flip the car around and start heading back that direction, but now everything seems so foreign to me. I don't recognize anything. I come up to a street sign that kind of sounds familiar, so I took a chance and turned down that road. I knew almost instantly that I had made a bad move turning here. The road went from pavement to dirt. It led me to nowhere. By this time, I had been turning wrong directions for an hour. It's about 11:30 now, and I have no idea where I am. I decide to park my car and sleep in it for the night and try to find my way when the sun comes up. It's snowing outside now, and I'm trying to cuddle up with my duffel bag that I packed. But then I see something. It's pitch black outside, but I can see a dark silhouette of a man outside my car. It was standing in one spot. I couldn't tell if it was looking at me or not. I was getting scared, but also nervous because I felt like maybe I should ask if they know the way back to the main road. I decided that I need to ask. I roll down my window and shout out, "Excuse me?" The second that I say that, the thing takes off running into the bushes. That was really weird. I roll the window back up. It's so quiet outside. No sounds or cars or airplanes or anything. Just pure silence. Something inside me was very uneasy. I felt like whatever I saw was still around. I couldn't relax until I knew it was gone. So I throw on a jacket, open my car door, and get out. I crawl out of my car. It's freezing outside. I'm looking off into the darkness. My eyes are hurting from how hard I'm squinting my lids to see farther. As I'm looking, I start hearing this heavy breathing. My heart starts pounding. The breathing is coming from behind me. I slowly turn around, and then I see it. That thing from earlier is on top of my car, staring at me. Its eyes were glowing red. There's saliva dripping from its mouth. It has the body of a man, but the face of a demon. I jump back into my car, attempt to start it, as urine is streaming down my leg. I finally steady my hand enough to insert the key. I start the car and peel out down the road. I continued to look back, but the thing was not following me. I eventually drove enough to where I found the main road. I sped to my girlfriend's house and got there around 3 a.m. I banged on her door until she opened it. I told her what happened, but she didn't believe me. No one I ever told believed me. But I know what I saw. I'll never forget those red glowing eyes. When I turned 16, my father was pretty pushy about me getting my license. He was always the type of guy who said, "You need to take care of your business." He was a pretty old-fashioned man. He didn't agree with technology. He didn't believe in GPS. He felt that a real girl should know how to read a map and figure out direction based off of where the sun was. So a few months after my 16th birthday, my father handed me the keys to his Volvo. I was freshly licensed and ready to hit the road by myself finally. I gave my dad a hug and told him I loved him. I started heading to the front door when my dad let out a loud, clearing the throat noise. I stopped and looked back to see my dad's hand was out. He mumbled out, "Your phone, please." He wanted me to take a map and drive 30 minutes east, make 3 right turns at very specific roads and 2 left turns, and end up at a diner and wait for him to show up shortly after. This was his test to see how well I would do without my phone. So I start driving out of town. 30 minutes goes by, and I see the first road that I need to turn on. I turn on it. A few minutes later, I see the second road, but it's blocked off for some reason. It's forcing me to take a different route. My dad never mentioned that the street would be blocked. I look at my map and figure out a new road to take. I make a U-turn and go down this different path. As I'm driving, the sun is setting, the street signs are getting very difficult to see. I pull over and look at my map. I didn't recognize where I was. I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. I start to panic, as it is only me on this back road. And then I notice something. There's a car following me down this dirt road. Its headlights are very bright. I get a little worried about this car. I'm only a small 16-year-old girl. I can't defend myself. I put the car into drive and start driving away from this vehicle. I pick up the speed, and I notice this car is doing the same. I try to park in a turnout part of the street and let this car pass, but it doesn't. It pulls up right behind me. I'm terrified. I hit the gas again, and now I'm being completely chased by this car. The only thing I could see was those glaring headlights right behind me. I'm starting to envision myself being murdered by this person in the middle of a dark dirt road. I start crying and screaming, "Leave me alone!" And then I remember that my dad always kept a wood bat in the back seat. I stick my arm in the back while trying to keep my eyes focused on the road, and then I feel the bat. I realize at this moment that I need to defend myself from this car. I skid off of the road and put the car in park. The car behind me stops behind my car, only just 50 feet back. I take the bat and hold it like I'm going to swing for a home run. I scream as I run up on this guy as he's getting out of his vehicle. I swing the bat and deliver a fatal blow to this guy's head. I can't see anything because it's so dark, but I can feel the blood from this guy's head running down the road and over my toes in the sandals that I'm wearing. I step over this guy to go into his car to find his phone to call the police. I see his phone sitting on the seat. I'm having an anxiety attack as I'm reaching for his phone. I pick it up and unlock the screen. I'm confused, as I'm realizing that his phone has the same background picture as my phone does. Then I realize the phone has the same apps that my phone does. I'm starting to realize that this is my phone, and then I realize that I recognize this car. I say out loud. I turn on the flashlight on the phone and point it down at this man. It's my dad. He must have been following me in case I got lost. I break down crying when it all hits me. I killed my dad with his own baseball bat. One day during the summer, I'm heading through the country at night to go to a friend's house for his birthday party. I've never been there before, so I'm a little lost trying to find the house. His address is 2214 Lake Way. I come up to the area where I'm supposed to be turning on this street, but the road sign was vandalized with graffiti, and I can't really read the street name, so I figured I'd turn down the street anyways and see if the numbers at least match up. So, and fortunately they did. I see 2206, 2210, and then I find 2214. I park my vehicle and get out. I start heading towards the house and up the driveway. I get to the front door and knock on it. No answer. I knock again, and then out of nowhere all the lights turn off. I'm a little confused. Obviously someone is in the house. I figure maybe it's my friends playing a trick on me. So I head around the house to a window to look inside. When I get to the window, I look inside and I can't see much. And then I see a dark figure run by. Honestly, it kind of creeped me out. I keep looking in when I see the figure run by again. I'm so confused. What is going on? I knock on the window and say, "Hello?" And then the figure slowly walks by and stops. It slowly turns towards me. It's just looking at me for a good 30 seconds. I don't know what to do at this point. I say again, "Hello?" Right as I say that, the figure runs straight towards me at full speed and slams its face against the window. I jump back and see that it's an old woman. She's not wearing any clothes. Her hair is thin and gray. She looks at me, deep into my eyes, and smiles slowly as a line of blood runs down her head from where she hit her head on the window. She has no teeth, just a smile that sent chills down my spine. I start walking backwards when this woman starts screaming at me. She's screaming and smiling and laughing while crying. It freaked me out so bad that I sprinted back to my car and drove away. I drove home and called my friend. He told me I turned down the street before his street. I made a wrong turn and ended up at a house with the same numbered address. That was the creepiest thing I'd ever experienced. The setting, dark, gravel road, covered in leaves. Me, alone, lost. I was trying to find my way to my boyfriend's house, but I took a wrong turn. My phone was dead. I forgot my charger. The road went for a few miles before I eventually came up to a dead-end sign. I was scared that I was lost, but relieved that I found a dead-end sign, because all that it meant was that I only had one direction to go, which was back the other way. I turned my car around and started driving when I slammed all my brakes. I got in the road was another dead-end sign. How did that sign get there? I could swear that I turned around on the same road. So how could it be there? Maybe I took another wrong turn. So I made a U-turn. I drove for a few minutes down the street, when all of a sudden, another dead-end sign. This was impossible. I didn't make a wrong turn this time. How did that sign get there? I'm terrified now. Every time I turned my car around, there was a new dead-end sign in front of me. I get out of my car in a panic. I look around, and all around me were dead-end signs everywhere. I was trapped in this one spot in the road. I screamed out, "What is happening?" And then I hear laughter from all around me. I start spinning in circles, trying to run from this laughter. I'm crying, I'm screaming. "So, Mr. Trial," he says, "after all of that, I don't know what to do," when all at once, the laughter stops. It's pure silence until I hear footsteps behind me on the gravel. I turn around, and there's a man in a black hooded gown. He points at me. I'm scared, frozen in my spot. And then the man runs at me with a long knife in his hand. I turn to run, but my feet are bound to the ground with the leaves and vines from the ground holding me still. I have nowhere to go. The man runs closer and closer as I'm screaming, and then he runs his long knife into my throat. The blood starts spraying everywhere. I fall to my knees. I pull the knife from my neck as the man takes the hood down from his gown, and then I see that he has no head. He takes the knife from my hands and repeatedly stabs me in the neck until my head is severed from my body. He picks up my head and places it in the spot where his head should be, and then I die. Everything turns black, and then it happens. I wake up, and life is back to normal. I'm now sitting in my psychiatrist's office, explaining this reoccurring dream I've had for the last 6 years. I'm afraid that I'll never sleep well again. When I was in my early 30s, I remember I had to travel to a town 4 hours over from mine for work. I recently was promoted, and I had to do training in a different office. So I'm driving, trying to find this location, when I realize nothing is looking like the town that my boss said it would. He said I'd see a Taco Bell and a big hotel as I entered the town, but I didn't see any of that. I must have taken the wrong exit or the wrong turn or something. So I pull into this rural area. There's only one house for every mile of road. I pull into the driveway of this one single house. It's an old, disgusting house with broken down cars everywhere and old newspapers all over the ground. It was filthy, but I was lost and I needed directions. So I head to the front door and ring the bell, but nobody answers. I ring a few more times, but still no luck. I'm about to go back to my car when I hear some voices in the woods behind this house. Normally I'd ignore it and leave, but I was low on gas and needed to know where to go. So I go behind the house. The voices are starting to get louder as I approach the woods. I'm trying to stay quiet, but I'm a little bit nervous. I can see through some of the trees and I see a fire. I walk a little closer and I can see a group of people standing around the fire. I watch them for a few minutes when I can start hearing what they're saying. They are chanting a weird chant, and then I can also see something in the background. It's a man. He's in his underwear. He's hanging from a tree. His body is bloody and cut up, and a noose is around his neck. These people are walking up to him one by one. They each have a knife and are cutting into his side and having blood pour from him into a cup. I'm getting weak and my knees are giving out from the fear of what I'm seeing. These people killed this guy, and they are each holding a cup full of his blood. They keep chanting out loud while holding their cups. As the chanting stops, they all hold their cups to the sky and they scream out loud, "O dark Lord, take our souls, and forever may we serve you." And then they drink the blood. I let out a huge gasp of air. That's when they all turn their heads at me. They see me, and then they all start running at me. I turn and run back to my car as these people are screaming out, "Get her!" and start driving away. I look into my mirror and I can see them all standing there watching me leave. And then I made it to a nearby town and I used the phone to call the police. The cops asked where this location is, but I don't remember, so they couldn't go investigate. Nothing ever happened to those people as far as I know, but I'm so glad they didn't catch me. Taking a wrong turn was the first mistake. Trusting those smiles was the second. That day started like any other. I had packed up my gear and set off for a solo hiking trip in the Smoky Mountains. A city guy with a knack for exploring nature's quieter corners, I'd done this sort of thing dozens of times, but something about the tranquility of the dense forest always called me back. I'm Carter Delaney, a bit of a loner, always finding solace in solitude, and I've had my fair share of life's knocks. Just a few years ago, I lost my brother in a car accident. Ever since, these hikes have been my therapy, a way to find some peace. I never expected this trip would turn out to be anything but the usual. Navigating through the dense foliage, I felt the weight of my pack and the crunch of leaves under my boots. I had planned a route that took me through some lesser-known trails. It was supposed to be a peaceful journey, just me and nature, no distractions, no people. But I must have read the map, or maybe I was just too lost in my thoughts. Either way, I found myself on a path I didn't recognize. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I realized I was off course. Pulling out my map, I tried to get my bearings. That's when I noticed a narrow dirt road winding through the trees. It wasn't on my map, but it seemed like a shortcut that could get me back on track. I decided to follow it, hoping it would intersect with the trail I was supposed to be on. The road was rough and overgrown, a clear indication that it hadn't been used in years. I pushed through, determined to find my way. The forest around me grew denser, the canopy blocking out much of the remaining light. That's when I heard it, faint sounds of laughter and conversation. Relieved to hear human voices, I picked up my pace. Rounding a bend, I stumbled upon a clearing. There stood a ramshackle cabin, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. A group of people, men and women, stood around a fire, their faces lit by the flickering flames. They turned to look at me as I emerged from the trees, their expressions a mix of curiosity and amusement. "Hey there, Lost," a burly man with a thick beard called out, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. "Yeah, I think I took a wrong turn somewhere," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Come on over, have a drink," another man offered, raising a bottle. He was younger, maybe in his late 20s, with a sly smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I hesitated, but the lure of company and the warmth of the fire was too tempting. I walked over, dropping my pack beside a log. "I'm Carter," I introduced myself. "Good to meet you, Carter." "I'm Zeke," the burly man said, clapping me on the shoulder with a hand that felt like a sledgehammer. "This here's my brother Tom," he nodded to the younger man, "and our friends Caleb, Beth, and Mary." The women, Beth and Mary, looked at me with smiles that seemed a bit too wide. Something about their eyes made me uneasy, but I shrugged it off. Maybe they were just friendly country folk. We talked for a while, sharing stories and laughs. They offered me food and drink, and though I wasn't particularly hungry, I accepted out of politeness. As the night wore on, I felt a strange sense of unease creeping over me. Their laughter grew louder, more raucous, and their eyes glinted in the firelight. "So, what brings you out here, Carter?" Caleb, a wiry man with a scar running down his cheek, asked. "Just hiking, trying to clear my head," I replied. "You picked a hell of a place for it," Zeke said, his tone shifting slightly. "Yeah, these woods can be, tricky," Tom added, his smile now a predatory leer. I glanced around, suddenly aware of how isolated we were. The cabin, the fire, the group, it all felt too staged, too perfect. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I didn't want to appear rude or paranoid. "Well, I should probably get going, find my way back to the trail before it gets too dark," I said, standing up and reaching for my pack. "Nonsense," Zeke boomed, blocking my path. "You'll stay the night, plenty of room in the cabin. No, really, I insist," he growled, his grip tightening on my arm. I realized then that I wasn't just dealing with friendly locals. These people had a different agenda, and I was right in the middle of it. I tried to pull away, but Caleb and Tom were on me in an instant, their hands rough and unforgiving. "Let's not make this difficult," Caleb hissed, his breath hot on my face. Fear surged through me as I struggled against them. Beth and Mary watched with detached interest, their earlier friendliness replaced by cold amusement. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "You'll find out soon enough," Zeke said, a sinister smile spreading across his face. They dragged me into the cabin, the door slamming shut behind us. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of decay and something else I couldn't quite place. They pushed me into a chair, tying me up with practiced ease. "We like to have guests for dinner," Tom said, his voice dripping with malice. My mind raced, trying to process the situation. These weren't just unfriendly locals, they were something far worse. My heart pounded as I struggled against the ropes, but they held fast. "Please, you don't have to do this," I pleaded, desperation seeping into my voice. "Oh, but we do," Beth said, her voice eerily calm. "It's tradition." They began to prepare for whatever gruesome ritual they had in mind. I watched in horror as they laid out tools and weapons, each more terrifying than the last. The realization hit me like a freight train. I was their next victim. Hours passed, each one more agonizing than the last. They taunted me, their words a cruel reminder of what was to come. I knew I had to find a way out, but my options were limited. The ropes cut into my skin, and every movement sent waves of pain through my body. As dawn approached, a sense of resignation washed over me. I had no choice but to accept my fate. That's when I heard it, a rustling outside the cabin followed by hushed voices. "Someone's coming!" Zeke barked, his eyes narrowing. They scrambled to hide their tools and weapons, their demeanor shifting from menacing to cautious. The door burst open and a group of hikers stood there, their eyes widening at the scene before them. "What the hell is going on here?" one of them demanded, his voice laced with shock. "Nothing you need to worry about," Zeke said, trying to block their view, but it was too late. The hikers saw me tied up and battered, and their expressions turned from confusion to anger. "Untie him now," another hiker shouted, stepping forward. Zeke hesitated, his eyes darting between the hikers and his family. He knew he was outnumbered and outmatched. With a growl of frustration, he gestured for Caleb and Tom to untie me. "Get out of here," Zeke snarled, his eyes burning with fury. The hikers helped me up, their hands gentle but firm. They led me out of the cabin and back into the safety of the forest. As we made our way to the main trail, I glanced back at the cabin one last time. The family stood in the doorway, their eyes filled with hatred and defeat. The hikers didn't ask many questions, and I didn't offer many answers. We walked in silence, the weight of what had just happened hanging heavily in the air. When we finally reached the trailhead, they called the authorities, ensuring that the family would be dealt with. I thanked the hikers, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. They nodded, their faces kind but weary. As I made my way back to civilization, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and disbelief. I had survived, but the memories of that night would haunt me forever. That wrong turn had led me into a nightmare, but I had emerged on the other side. Scarred but alive, I vowed to be more careful in the future. Nature was still my sanctuary, but I had learned that even the most peaceful places could hide the darkest secrets. As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. The forest, with all its beauty and danger, had tested me in ways I never imagined, but I had survived, and that was all that mattered. They said it would be a simple camping trip, but what they didn't tell me was how the dirt roads could easily deceive you into taking a wrong turn. I'm Gabriel Thornton, and this is how a weekend getaway turned into a fight for survival. My friends Max and Lucy convinced me to join them on this trip to a secluded spot in the forests of northern Maine. Max had found a perfect camping site, he said, far from the usual tourist traps. The three of us loaded up the car with camping gear, snacks, and a cooler full of beer, excited about the adventure ahead. The drive started off great. We laughed, sang along to our favorite songs, and joked about the horrors we might encounter in the woods. The paved road soon gave way to gravel and then dirt, but we trusted Max's navigational skills. That trust began to wane as the roads became narrower and more overgrown. When we hit a dead end, it was clear we were lost. Max's confidence was waning too. "This doesn't look right," he muttered, peering at the map on his phone. The signal was gone, rendering GPS useless. "Just turn around," Lucy suggested. "We'll find the main road and figure it out from there." But the main road was elusive. We drove for what felt like hours, every turn leading us deeper into the dense forest. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that danced menacingly as our headlights cut through the darkness. "Let's just set up camp here," Max finally said, pulling over to a small clearing. "We'll find our way in the morning." Setting up the tents was quick, though the forest seemed eerily quiet. The usual chirping of crickets and rustling of leaves were absent. A chill ran down my spine, but I shrugged it off, attributing it to our unsettling situation. We built a fire, hoping to lift our spirits. Max cracked open a beer, passing them around. "To getting lost and finding our way," he toasted. We clinked cans, trying to maintain our bravado. The firelight flickered on our faces as we shared stories, but the atmosphere grew tenser with every passing minute. Then we heard it, a rustling in the bushes. We froze, listening intently. "Probably just a deer," Max said, but his voice lacked conviction. Lucy's eyes were wide. "Maybe we should pack up and sleep in the car." Before we could decide, a figure emerged from the trees. It was a man, his clothes tattered and his hair wild. He was thin, almost skeletal, and his eyes darted around frantically. "Help me," he croaked, stumbling toward us. "They're coming." Max stood up, trying to appear calm. "Who's coming? Are you okay?" "They'll find us," the man whispered, collapsing by the fire. He looked up at us with desperate eyes. "You have to run," panic set in. Max and I exchanged worried glances, while Lucy backed away, trembling. "We can't just leave him here," Lucy said. Before we could formulate a plan, the man's eyes widened in terror. "Run!" he screamed. "Run!" The bushes rustled again, and this time it wasn't just one figure emerging. A group of people, their faces obscured by shadows, stepped into the firelight. They were dressed in ragged clothing, their hair matted and unkempt, their eyes wild and hungry, fixed on us. Max grabbed a log from the fire, brandishing it like a weapon. "Stay back!" he yelled. But they didn't stay back. They advanced, their movements deliberate and predatory. One of them lunged at Max, who swung the log, connecting with the attacker's head. The man went down, but more took his place. Lucy screamed, turning to run, but one of the attackers grabbed her, pulling her back. I rushed forward, tackling the assailant. We tumbled to the ground, and I felt a sharp pain as he clawed at my face. I managed to land a punch, knocking him off me. "Get to the car!" Max shouted, fending off another attacker. I grabbed Lucy's hand, dragging her toward the car. We scrambled inside, locking the doors just as the attackers reached us. They pounded on the windows, their faces contorted with rage and hunger. Max was still outside, fighting them off. "Max, get in!" I yelled, but he was surrounded. He swung the log wildly, but there were too many of them. One of them tackled him, and he went down. I started the car, gunning the engine. "We have to go," Lucy sobbed, but I couldn't leave Max behind. I threw the car into gear, driving toward the attackers. The headlights illuminated their twisted faces as I honked the horn, trying to scare them off. Max struggled to his feet, making a break for the car. He reached the passenger door, yanking it open and diving inside. "Go, go, go!" he screamed, slamming the door shut. I floored the gas pedal, the car lurching forward. The attackers chased us, their hands slapping against the windows. I swerved, trying to shake them off. We barreled down the dirt road, leaving them behind in the darkness. My heart pounded as I drove, not knowing where we were going. The forest seemed endless, the roads all looking the same. We were running on adrenaline, our minds racing with fear and confusion. "Who the hell were they?" Lucy sobbed from the back seat. Max, bloodied and bruised, shook his head. "I don't know, but we can't stop. They're still out there." We drove through the night, our eyes darting to the mirrors, expecting to see those crazed faces behind us. The car's fuel gauge dipped lower and lower, a cruel reminder that our escape was limited. At dawn, we stumbled upon a small, dilapidated gas station. It was a godsend, but it also felt like a trap. The place was deserted, the windows boarded up, but there was a single pump still operational. "I'll fill up the tank," I said, stepping out cautiously. Max and Lucy kept watch, scanning the tree line for any signs of movement. As I pumped the gas, a noise caught my attention. A soft, almost imperceptible rustling. I turned to see a young girl standing at the edge of the forest. She was dirty, her clothes torn, and her eyes wide with fear. "Hey," I called out softly, "are you okay?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "They took my brother," she whispered. "We have to help him." Max and Lucy joined me, their expressions grim. "We can't just leave her," Lucy said, "but we need to get out of here." The girl's desperation was palpable. "Please," she begged, "he's still alive." "I know he is," Max sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We're running on fumes and adrenaline. If we go back, we might not make it out again." I looked at the girl, then at my friends. "We have to try," I said. "We can't leave her brother behind." Reluctantly, Max agreed. We filled the tank and followed the girl's directions back into the forest. She gestured to a mountain trail that spanned the river. We followed it, and we gradually reached the bank together. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every rustle a potential attacker. We reached a clearing where the girl said her brother was being held. It was an old, abandoned cabin, its windows dark and foreboding. We approached cautiously, weapons ready. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of decay. The floors creaked under our weight as we moved through the rooms. In the basement, we found him, tied up and barely conscious, but alive. "We're here to help," I whispered, cutting his bonds. The boy's eyes fluttered open, and he managed a weak smile, but our relief was short-lived. As we carried him up the stairs, the door burst open and the attackers flooded in. We fought desperately, but they were relentless. The girl's brother was too weak to walk, and we had to drag him through the chaos. We reached the car, piling in as the attackers swarmed around us. Max floored the gas pedal and we tore down the road, the attackers chasing us until they faded into the distance. The drive back to civilization was a blur. We were exhausted, covered in blood and dirt, but we had survived. We reached a small town and stumbled into the sheriff's office, telling our story in ragged breaths. The authorities didn't believe us at first, but when they saw the condition we were in and the evidence we had, they launched an investigation. The attackers were real, and their hideout was found, along with the remains of their previous victims. In the end, we made it out alive, but the experience changed us. We had faced something unimaginable and survived. The girl and her brother were reunited with their family, and we returned to our lives, forever marked by the horrors we had encountered. There's no dramatic ending here, just a return to the mundane, forever changed but outwardly the same. Life goes on, but somewhere deep in the forests of Maine, the shadows still hide secrets, and the memory of that night lingers in the back of our minds. The highway stretched endlessly ahead of me, a black ribbon cutting through the dense forest of northern Minnesota. I had always prided myself on my sense of direction, but on this particular day, I was hopelessly lost. I had set out early that morning from Duluth, intending to visit an old college friend in a small town called Ely, but a wrong turn somewhere around the Vermilion State Forest had set me on an uncharted path. My name is Neil Vickers, and I have a habit of taking scenic routes. This time, it was a mistake. The afternoon sun was sinking low, casting long shadows that made the forest look even more impenetrable. I glanced at my gas gauge, nearly empty. I needed to find a place to stop, get my bearings, and refuel. That's when I spotted a dirt road leading off the main highway. There was a hand-painted sign that read, "Bratton's Fill-Up, 5 miles." Bratton's Fill-Up was an old-fashioned gas station, the kind you only see in movies. An ancient pump stood in front of a dilapidated building, and a rusted-out pickup truck was parked to one side. The place looked deserted, but I had no other options. As I pulled in, a tall, thin man with greasy overalls and a disheveled beard emerged from the shadows. His eyes were wary but not unfriendly. "Need a fill-up?" he asked, his voice gravelly. Yeah, I replied, stepping out of my car. And directions? I'm trying to get to Ely. He nodded and started pumping gas. You're a bit off course. Ely's about 60 miles west of here. You took the wrong turn back at Vermilion. I groaned inwardly. Great. Can you point me back to the main road? He chuckled. Sure, but it's getting dark. Not safe to drive these roads at night. Lots of deer, you know. There's a motel about 10 miles back the way you came. I'd suggest you stay there and set out fresh in the morning. I considered his advice. He was right. Driving in the dark in an unfamiliar area was not the smartest idea. Thanks, I'll do that. He finished pumping and handed me the bill. As I was paying, another figure emerged from the building. A woman, heavy-set with a sullen expression, carrying a tray of what looked like homemade jerky. Want some? She asked, thrusting the tray towards me. Made it myself. I was about to decline when I noticed her gaze was fixed on something behind me. I turned to see two more people coming out from behind the gas station. A burly man with a scarred face and a teenage girl who looked eerily calm. We don't get many visitors, the girl said, her voice oddly flat. You should stay for dinner. Alarm bells started ringing in my head. There was something off about this place and its inhabitants. I forced a smile. Thanks, but I need to get back on the road. The tall man from before grabbed my arm, not hard, but firmly enough to make his point. Nonsense. We insist. Panic set in. I pulled away, muttering something about needing to make a phone call. I headed back to my car, but before I could reach it, the burly man blocked my path. We've got everything you need here, he said, his voice a low rumble. No need to rush off. I looked around for any escape route, but the forest loomed on all sides, and the dirt road I had come from seemed to stretch forever. I was trapped. All right, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dinner sounds good. The tall man grinned. Smart choice. Inside the building, the smell of cooking meat mingled with the stench of decay. The furniture was old and worn, the kind you'd find in a thrift store. They led me to a table and sat me down. The woman brought out plates of food, meat, potatoes, and some kind of thick stew. The family sat around the table, watching me expectantly. I took a bite of the meat, chewing slowly. It tasted strange, unlike any meat I'd had before. My stomach churned, and I had to force it down. The girl smiled at me, her teeth sharp and yellow. Good, isn't it? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating. I had to get out of there. But how? The burly man sat closest to the door, and the others were blocking any other exit. Excuse me, I said, standing up. I need to use the restroom. The tall man pointed down a narrow hallway. Last door on the right. I walked down the hall, my heart pounding. As soon as I was out of their sight, I started looking for a way out. The windows were barred and the doors were locked. I opened the restroom door and slipped inside, locking it behind me. There was a small window above the sink, just big enough for me to squeeze through. I climbed onto the sink, pried the window open, and pulled myself up. As I wriggled through the window, I heard footsteps approaching. I had to hurry. I dropped to the ground outside and took off running towards the forest. I didn't know where I was going, but anywhere was better than that house of horrors. Branches scratched my face and hands as I ran, but I didn't stop. I could hear shouts behind me. The family was chasing me. I stumbled over roots and rocks, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest was a labyrinth, and I had no idea which way to go. After what felt like hours, I saw a light ahead. I ran towards it, hoping it was a road or a house. It was a clearing with a small cabin in the center. I pounded on the door, praying someone would be inside. An elderly man opened the door, his eyes widening in surprise. "What's going on, son? Please help me," I gasped. "There are people after me." He let me in and locked the door behind me. "Sit down, catch your breath." I sat on a worn-out chair, trying to calm my racing heart. "Thank you. I don't know who they are, but they're dangerous." The man nodded. "You're safe here. This is my hunting cabin. Got plenty of guns and ammunition." He handed me a glass of water, and I drank it gratefully. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you weren't here." He patted my shoulder. "You'll be fine, just stay put, they won't find you here." I hoped he was right. The minutes ticked by, and the adrenaline slowly drained from my body. I was exhausted, but I couldn't let my guard down. I needed to stay alert. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. The door burst open, and the burly man from the gas station stood there, a crazed look in his eyes. "Found you," he snarled. The old man grabbed a shotgun from the wall and fired a warning shot. "Get out of here, or the next one's going through your skull." The burly man hesitated, then backed away. "This isn't over," he growled before disappearing into the night. The old man locked the door again and turned to me. "You need to leave. They'll be back with more." I nodded, my hands shaking. "Thank you for everything. I'll never forget this." He handed me a flashlight and pointed towards a trail. "Follow this path, it'll lead you to the highway. Stay safe, son." I nodded again and set off into the night, my heart heavy with fear and gratitude. I didn't stop until I reached the highway, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. I flagged down a passing car and collapsed into the passenger seat, my ordeal finally over. I never found out what happened to that family or why they had targeted me, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never forget that night in the Minnesota forest. I'd just taken a wrong turn off Route 61. Blame it on the outdated GPS or my own stupidity, but there I was, stuck on a narrow, winding road in the middle of nowhere. My name's Quentin Radabaugh, and I've always had a knack for finding trouble. This time, it seemed I'd found more than my fair share. The landscape around me was desolate. Thick woods on either side of the road, the kind where sunlight struggles to pierce through the canopy. I figured I'd turn around at the next clearing or side road, but as fate would have it, the road only grew narrower and rougher. Eventually, I stumbled upon a rusty old sign that read Blackwood. Against my better judgment, I kept going. The road led me deeper into the forest, the trees crowding closer as if trying to swallow my car whole. Just as I began to question my decision,